871. That is the number of college football games we've consumed this season to get to this very point. And on Monday night, number 872 will crown us our national champion. Welcome into the SpringBlake College Football Show. This is your favorite ball knower's favorite ball knowing show. I want to make that an acronym. What would that be? That would be YFBKFBKS. Put it on a t-shirt. Today is Thursday, January 15th. On today's show, lots to talk about. Got a national championship game. I don't know if you've heard about it. We will preview that game. I'll hand out my winner. We have not been doing great since the midpoint of the season. We'll try and correct that. This is the first year of this show. If we go 1-0 on national champion picks, not a bad start. Some people would call that undefeated. So we'll talk about the game. We'll check back in on the transfer portal as we will now, as we have for the last 2 weeks, as we will continue to do until that window closes. And long-awaited addition to the show, we are going to start tying a bow on team seasons as we begin to transition into what people like to call the off-season. Dumb, very dumb segment. We're going to spin a wheel, and I'm going to give out some TBHs and rates like we're back in middle school. But before we can get into all that, I have to ask each and every one of you to please continue supporting this show. If you are here for the very first time, thank you for joining us. My name's SpringBlake. This is a college football show. Try to make it as simple as possible. If you are on our YouTube channel, that's where I want you to be. Thank you for being there. Like the video while you're here. Leave a comment. Subscribe to the channel. Nice subscriber bump. Views hit or miss sometimes, but I appreciate the support on there. Still love you if you're just listening. Apple, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts. Make sure to leave us a 5-star review. Make sure to subscribe to the channel. And then head over to our socials. That is Twitter and TikTok at SpringBlake CFB. So let's do the damn thing. Monday night in Miami, Florida. Mario Cristobal's Miami Hurricanes getting the chance to play for a national title in their very own home field, hosting Curt Cignetti's Indiana Hoosiers in a matchup absolutely no one would have predicted back in late August. If you're sitting here and you're like, yeah, saw this one coming, liar, liar, liar. I think both of these teams were respectfully being considered in the top 15, 16, so it's not like this is some G5 run to the national title. These are two very good teams that obviously have continued to be great teams. But predicting Indiana, Miami in August, no one did that. But when you think about how both of these teams got here, and that's not just through a grueling regular season, but through a grueling playoff run after it, it should be no surprise why they're the last two teams standing. These have been the most even-keeled groups I've seen on a football field all year. Both teams refuse to deviate from their brand of football. They are both so utterly attached to their identity. They live and die by clean execution and brute physicality. And they have builders at the head coach position that have readied the ship and make sure that the process is executed to near perfection. And it's funny, too, because these two builder-type head coaches have gone about it in very different but equally effective ways. Mario Cristobal is a recruiter at heart and has spent the last 4 years building out a program with an incredibly strong foundation. As a result of that foundation, he now has an offensive line that averages out at 6'5", 330 pounds, and a defensive line that averages out at 6'3", 300 pounds. That foundation allows them to dictate the tempo of games. They play slow, patient football, clean football, and allow their opponents to fall into the trap. But it's not just that approach. They also have the ability and the juice at the skill positions to snap right or to snap into focus when it's absolutely needed. Malachi Toney this season has played like the best receiver in college football, 1,100 yards, 10 total touchdowns. Mark Fletcher, a beast on the ground, 1,000-yard tailback, 12 scores there. Miami's run game has taken things up a notch in the postseason. It's been an elevated level of play. He's been the lead guy there. And it's not just those two. Keelan Marion, Chamar Brown, they play the Robin roles to tremendous success. And so with all of that in place, Carson Beck at quarterback, much like his head coach does, just readies the ship, keeps everything calm, cool, collected, and as a result, he boasts the third best completion rate in this sport. He is a 37-5 starting quarterback in college football. Now we'll try to win his third national championship. Obviously, the first as a starter. He was a backup for 2 years at Georgia, but pretty good college career if he could finish things off with a win in Miami. So that's how Miami's built to getting to this point. On the other side, no one, and I repeat, no one has built it like Curt Cignetti has. This thing was built out in the Elon days. He took what worked to James Madison and then took what worked at James Madison over to Bloomington, and all he has done, excuse me, let me start that over again. No one has built this thing out like Curt Cignetti has. No one in the history of college football has built in the way Curt Cignetti has built things out as a head coach. He built the foundational pieces in Elon, and he took what worked with him to James Madison, and he continued to build upon that success there. And once he was done at James Madison, he took that foundation and just moved it to Indiana. The process has remained the same everywhere he's been, and he's taken a lot of the same pieces. Curt Cignetti just does it his way, and he's got a coaching staff and a roster that are fully bought in on the process. So fuck your talent composite rankings, of which Indiana ranks 72nd on right now. Fuck your 5 stars, of which Indiana has 0 of right now. Curt Cignetti is a builder in his own very way, gets the right collection of guys to best fit his specific system. And that plan has sparked one of the most efficient turnarounds of a dead program in college football history. The Hoosiers are 23-1. Over the last 2 seasons. Indiana just had 23 wins in the previous 5 combined. Just absurd stuff we're witnessing right now. You know, whether or not this thing ends in a national championship on Monday night, and they are favored by 8.5 points in that game. So a lot of people do think it's heading that way. Say that it doesn't, even if it ends in defeat. What Curt Cignetti has done right now will go down as one of the great, if not the greatest, accomplishments in this sport's history. There is nothing like this. So that's how both of these teams have gotten here. Like I said, each their own very different way, but you've got very detail-oriented coaches, very plan-driven guys, and and a roster and coaching staff that have fully built in on the process. So now that we've set the table for the game, let's start chopping away at our food. Look, everybody is going to say the same thing about this game. It's going to be won in the trenches. It doesn't take rocket science to figure that one out. You know, you've got 2 of the best run games in the country. Miami's has certainly turned into that in the postseason. 2 of the best run defenses. It's size and technicality for Miami. It is proficiency from Indiana. That's where this game is going to be won or lost. But that's not where I want to start. The first thing that stands out to me in this game is how similarly these 2 teams match up on the stat sheets. I think both are going to sign up for the same type of game on Monday, but what type of game is really what has my mind kind of churning. Like, I think both of these teams will go in and just be like, yeah, we're going to play our brand, and it could go one of 2 very different ways. So let's just take a look at what is so very similar between these 2 teams. Miami has the 5th best time of possession mark in the sport. Indiana is 6th. Indiana has the 2nd best run defense in the country. Miami, they're at number 6. Miami has the most sacks in college football. Indiana tied for 2nd. Indiana has the 2nd best completion percentage out of its quarterbacks. Miami is 3rd. Both are top 5 in scoring defense, top 20 in third down offense and defense, top 12 in turnover margin. These teams go tit for tat in all their best categories, and both coaches refuse to abandon their brand of football. So what kind of game will that make for? That's what I find to be really interesting. I could just as easily see this being a game where the offensive efficiency stands out and leads both of these teams to going back and forth on the scoreboard. I could see that just as easily, though, as being a game where each defense stonewalls the others and the time of possession battle turns this thing into a field goal fest. Neither team is going to abandon what's worked for them this season, but as we've seen throughout the playoffs, Indiana could beat Ohio State in the Big Ten title game 13-10, but also boat race Oregon to 55 along the way. Meanwhile, Miami, they can win an ugly 24-14 game against Ohio State. They could also put up 31 and go on a game-winning 15-play drive with a couple minutes left to beat Ole Miss. They will have an answer for every type of game they try to sign up for. The total on this one, I couldn't even begin to tell you. If you told me that this thing gets up 27-24 and both teams just kind of exchange blows late and it was long drives but they finish in touchdowns, yeah, I could see that happening. Or I could also see each offense trying to keep the opposing offense on the sideline and it turns into a field goal fest and it finishes like 17-10. I could easily see either of those games. So it'll be really interesting to see which one does pop up. The next thing I want to turn our attention to in this game, because again, Indiana favored by 8.5 points. It's a big spread. I think right now it's if Miami won this game, they'd be the third biggest underdogs to ever win a national championship. I think that was the stat. It's the third biggest spread where they are underdogs. So in a game where Indiana is the prohibitive favorite, I want to turn our attention to the Miami upset potential and take a look and see, like, can this Miami team lean on Indiana's sensitive spots to make them uncomfortable in their ever-steady approach? Now, Indiana has looked like a flawless football team at times, so finding their sensitive parts is a hard thing to do. But I found something on each side of the ball that can be a focal point for this Miami team. On offense, it starts with moving the chains through the air. Indiana ranks 74th in the country in passing plays allowed of 10 or more yards. I think I looked through every potential stat on team rankings or college football stats. That was the lowest I could find something. Indiana down at 74th in passing plays of 10 plus yards allowed. Meanwhile, the Canes offense ranks top 10 in terms of passing plays of 10 or more yards this season. So you're getting a Miami offense that can move the chains through the air and an Indiana defense that they're great just about everywhere, but you can get those intermediate type throws against them. Miami knows that they're not going to win this game if Carson Beck's B game shows up. It hasn't yet, which has been great. But you can certainly keep this Indiana defense on its toes if Carson Beck's A game shows up and you're not just consistently hitting your wideouts, not just getting the timing crisp from Carson Beck, but you're also hitting them in stride to allow them to work after the catch and consistently keep the chains moving. You know, Miami has done such a good job of committing to that ground game that you're allowing the defenses to sink in, but they also have the playmakers to make those chunk plays. Now, 20 or more yards, not totally sure. I'm not asking for Carson Beck to start stretching the field or Malachi Toney to take 150 yards to the house. I'm not asking for that because Indiana's defense, they don't really allow the 20 plus as much as they do the 10s. And I don't believe after the catch, I think they're one of the best teams at limiting receivers making plays after the catch. I am not asking for Carson Beck to start airing this thing out. I'm just asking for the consistent dinking and dunking that we've gotten from this group all year. And in turn, you're going to allow your offense to have the balance that it definitely needs. And while it's hard to find something flawed on Indiana's defense, it's even harder to apply that to the offense. It is like poetry in motion watching this group operate, but one potential area of weakness I'm looking at is their pass protection. Now, the Hoosiers are an above-average team in that category. They've got the 54th best mark as it pertains to sacks allowed. But for a team that usually finds itself in the top 10s, if not top 5s of every offensive statistical category, this is the one thing that strays from the norm and deserves our attention. The Hoosiers have faced 4 separate Power 4 opponents this season that currently find themselves inside the top 40 in terms of sack production. And here's how those games fared for Indiana. The first was Penn State. They gave up 3 sacks. The second was Wisconsin. They gave up 5 sacks. Ohio State, 3 sacks allowed. And Alabama, 3 sacks allowed. Now, those 4 games got 2 very different results out of Fernando Mendoza. 2 off performances and 2 it didn't matter a whiff. Fernando Mendoza completed about 64% of his passes against Penn State and Ohio State. Those are the 2 off ones. Meanwhile, he completed over 87% of his passes against Alabama and Wisconsin. I think Wisconsin, it was like 21 of 24 in that game. So that's not to say it's a guarantee that putting pressure on Mendoza and getting him into a shaky performance is going to ultimately swing the outcome of this game. But that's still an average of 3.5 sacks allowed across 4 games, across the best teams that they've faced so far. Some of the worst performances that you've gotten from the offensive line, and here is the kicker in all of that. Those 4 teams, Penn State, Wisconsin, Ohio State, and Alabama, they're top 40. None of them are inside the top 20. Meanwhile, Miami, the number 1 team in the country in total sacks. So introduce that potential fragility to this game. Apply it to the Miami defensive line, a group that, as I mentioned, the number 1 pass rush in the nation, a group that gets to the quarterback in under 2.5 seconds more than any other team does in the sport. And I can definitely see a world where this group turns Indiana's offense into something that we've only seen once or twice this season. Keep in mind, going up against Ohio State, it wasn't like they boat raced them like they did Oregon. That was a tight 13-10 type game. That, to me, resembles the best pass rush that Indiana has seen all year, and I still believe Miami's is a tad better. So those are the 2 areas I could see Miami kind of chopping away at if they want to expose Indiana's potential flaws. Again, it doesn't mean that the win is going to come out. Indiana might just very well have the answers to each punch Miami throws. You know, having a quarterback like Fernando Mendoza, a dude that does have the best passing grade under pressure amongst Power 4 quarterbacks this year, he could mitigate a poor performance from the Indiana offensive line if he's just able to sit in there like he has all year, deliver to his targets. The one thing that does stand out to me, though, is the quickness of it. You know, Indiana is a very explosive passing game. They are great at creating shots down the field. If Miami is getting to the quarterback, and this is just like the Ohio State game, under 2.5 seconds, you're not giving your receivers enough time at all to get down the field to create those explosive passing plays. So just something I'm keeping an eye on is that matchup, because I do think Fernando is great under pressure, but if the pressure's there before the receivers get open down the field, how different will that make this game? But as I mentioned, really good quarterback when he's under pressure, and could, even out a great day from the Miami defensive front. And then for the Indiana defense, the most sturdy run game in the sport, could consistently force the Miami group into 3rd and longs and kind of make those 10-yard passing plays I mentioned a little bit more predictable. So maybe Miami is hitting on all those because it's 2nd and short and you're expecting a run and, there's a 10-yard passing play. Maybe it's a little bit of that. If you're in those 3rd and longs, if the Indiana run defense does what it continues to have done all season, then I think you can have the counterpunch to Miami being able to consistently throw the ball 10 plus yards. Now, I know I teased it at the beginning. I haven't mentioned it yet. It does deserve to be talked about how this game is going to be won on the ground. So we'll finish that out before we tie a bow on this game preview. If you love man football, this is the perfect way to end your college football season. I was listening to Josh Pate preview his show, and he always talks about how, when you watch football, you watch where the football goes. You watch it get snapped to the quarterback, you go to the playmakers, so on and so forth. If you want appointment television, you keep your eye on those trenches the entire game, because that's where this game is going to be won. Allow me to get, I know I said man football, but allow me to get a little bit nerdy when we talk about the man football aspect of this game. Miami is all about getting downhill, on the defense in its ground game. They run its duo concept 28% of the time. Duo just means you're double teaming on the interior, which allows Mark Fletcher to either cut to the outside or surge behind that blocking double team, depending on how the middle linebacker reacts to it. If he sinks in, Fletcher pops out. If Fletcher stays where he's at, you just go behind the double team and churn out some yards there. It's led to immense amounts of success. Fletcher leads all Power 4 tailbacks in yards gained from that duo concept. But this Indiana team, everything that we've talked about them all year is just how smart they are and how crisp the execution is. They have one of the smartest linebacker groups in the country. They allow just 2.7 yards per attempt when defending duo concepts. That battle right there of great on great should be one of the first things we look for in this game to get an early feel on how the battle overall will go. It's not just the technical aspect of it. I do wonder Miami's size and being able to take those 330-pound offensive linemen to the second level against those linebackers. I'm just saying, it's something that's going to be very important to watch if you want to get another indication as to why Miami could pull off this upset. And Indiana, on the flip side, Indiana's ground game versus the Miami defense. Indiana's ground game, very steady, very simple. They don't complicate two things. 60% of their runs are on man or inside zone concepts, and those runs lead to an average of 5.8 yards per carry, one of the best numbers in the sport. Miami, on the flip side, again, we're talking great on great here, has one of the best run defenses in the nation when going against man or inside zone concepts, allowing just 4.1 yards per carry. The trenches are going to play into everything else that we just talked about. And that's why I wanted to get those out first before coming back to this trench play. You know, we talk about Miami's potential upset. If they're running the ball effectively, if those duo concepts are hitting, if Miami's turning out 5 yards a carry, hell, even 4. Give me 4 yards a carry to where they're getting to those second and shorts, third and manageables, and you allow the 10-yard passing plays to be a little bit less predictable. I think Miami should be able to move better on Indiana's defense than most teams have this season. And on the flip side, if Miami is, I don't even remember their factor there. Oh, if Miami is able to stop the ground game and put Indiana in their own third and longs and in their more predictable passing plays, all of a sudden that pass rush duo of Ruben Bain and Akeem Mesidor, if they're getting to Mendoza within the 2.5 seconds, you're going to see Indiana's defense bottled up in really ways that we only saw against Ohio State. That game, and it's the one common opponent that these two teams have, it's so important to look at because we saw how Miami's trenches looked against Ohio State, and Ohio State's trenches didn't look bad against Indiana. It was just that Indiana had just a little bit more of an edge there. So I'm just saying, and I guess I should tie this into my prediction, because I am in very familiar territory with how I feel about this game. Much like how I felt in the quarterfinal round between Miami and Ohio State, point blank, I just think this spread is far too big. Now, I get why Indiana is favored. I'd favor them in the game as well. I think they're the better team. But to watch these two teams play against high-quality opponents over the last month, I think it's lunacy to put this thing beyond a touchdown. Indiana has been fantastic, but the run has been against a somewhat limited offense in Alabama, or a very limited offense, a one-dimensional offense in Alabama. And then against Oregon, I know that I rode the Oregon train, but Oregon went into that game with no healthy running backs. Their wide receiver room was banged up, and Indiana just kind of took advantage of poor situational decisions. Dante Moore, the pick six. Like that game, I don't know. I just wonder if we've seen how great Indiana has looked against the names of Alabama and Oregon, and we're like, oh, yep, so of course they'd be 8.5 point favorites against Miami. But on the mean side, it's like, well, were Alabama and Oregon as good as their name suggests they are? I don't know. You know, I think in this game for Miami, as they have the entire playoff run, I think they're going to be able to use its size to its advantage. Apply some pressure on Indiana's fronts like we haven't seen teams do this season. You know, we've seen Miami's ability to wear teams down over the course of the year. You're in game, 17, 16 of the season now? Like, it's only getting harder to get back up for these games. Now, Indiana counters that with a really nice, efficient practice schedule. They make sure that their players are as fresh and ready to go for game day as anybody does in the country. But I do think there is something to be said about Miami's size being able to lean on a defense for the span of 4 full quarters. To me, the longer in this game that it stays a one-possession game, the more that plays into Miami's favor. If Indiana is off to the hot start and it's 14-0 in the fourth quarter, all of a sudden Miami's size doesn't mean shit because they need to play with a little bit of speed. So that, to me, is something I think Miami will be able to do. I think they will be able to slow down Indiana's ground game, which will make for some of those longer third down attempts, get them out of sync. I do think that they will be able to get Fernando Mendoza. You know, you get to him quick enough to where the receivers aren't given time to stretch the field, as I mentioned, limiting the explosive passing game through the air. And I do think, like I said, the size of Miami's offensive line, you turn out 4 yards a carry. I don't need you to pop off explosives. Can you get to 2nd and 5? Can you get to 3rd and 2? Can you make it so that you don't know when the 10-yard passing play is coming out of Carson Beck? I think all of that stuff is going to be able to happen. You know, when I got to this point of my preview, of my breakdown, I wrote all this down. I was like, well, I'm bold to say that it's going to be close, but I'm not bold enough to pick Miami, right? Right? Right. I'm taking the Hoosiers. Give me Indiana. Close win. I'm going to split the uprights here. Indiana wins. Miami covers. Final score 24-40. I just think at the end of the day, some of the ancillary parts to Indiana's game will provide safety valves. If option 1 and option 2 aren't working, they usually got a good option 3 waiting in the wing, a new button that they can press that they haven't had to. Like this coaching staff is prepared for the moment. They've done a really nice job all season of counterpunching to what teams have thrown their way to try and stop them. Miami's going to keep this thing close. They will. I don't see this being a blowout. I don't see it being, something where we're looking up and it's like a Georgia TCU type game. I think this one's going to be close. Indiana wins, but Miami covers. Final score 24-20, and it completes what would be the greatest single story in college football history. Gave you a long one. Gave you a long preview on that. We're going to take a little break. Still got more to talk about. Transfer portal, TBHs and rates, like we're back in middle school. But I need some water, so we'll be right back.
Balake. Where is Balake at?
So we wouldn't be doing our job if we didn't come out here every few days and remind you all that the transfer portal is on fire. I think we're, almost 2 full weeks into the window being open. We've touched on a ton of stuff. If you are new to the show here and you're like, well, why didn't you discuss DJ Lagway, or why didn't you discuss what Texas has done? Go to previous episodes. We've talked about that. We're focusing on what has happened since our last show, which was Monday afternoon. So let's touch on the big ones. The biggest news in college football as it pertains to the transfer portal, NFL draft, player movement, is that Dante Moore has opted to stay in at Oregon for another season. And that comes one day after Dylan Raiola commits to the Ducks. And it's a move that I love for both of these quarterbacks. I'm not in the camp of people being like, well, it's good that Dante Moore avoided going to the Jets at number 2. That's not the story that I'm coming from of why it was a good decision for Dante Moore. The good decision is that there just wasn't enough game reps to make you feel comfortable about his transition to the NFL. There is a recent history in terms of games started in college versus how you pan out in the pros. 2 most recent examples, Anthony Richardson, I think he started 12 games, maybe 15 at Florida. Trey Lance had 1 full season at North Dakota State. Both of those guys taken in the top 5. They were the quickest flameouts I think we've seen over the last few years. Colts fan, not fully giving up on Anthony Richardson, but I'm like 90% of the way there. Dante Moore, he's 20 years old. He has 20 starts. I think getting another season as a starter, getting another 12 games under your belt, maybe even more if you can get back into the postseason, another year for the Ducks. I thought you saw a really good year out of Dante Moore. I thought it was more up and down than I think Oregon fans wanted to admit at times, especially when he scaled up in competition. But I think another year here at Oregon was the right move for him. So I love that decision for Dante to be able to get more reps before transitioning to the NFL. I think a lot of people were like, how could you give up $50 million guaranteed? And it's like, well, he's going to make money at Oregon. It won't be compared to what you get there. And there's a risk that next year you fall into a trap like Drew Aller, where all of a sudden you're not even considered in the top couple of rounds and you lose out on so much money that way. But in terms of just career longevity, I think avoiding that route that we've seen the Trey Lances and the Anthony Richardsons of the world take is the best route to ensure that you have a lengthy career in the NFL, or at least make it to that second contract. So I love the move for Dante Moore. I love the move for Dylan Raiola. Dylan Raiola, I kind of laughed at the idea of him going to Oregon when it was first thrown out, because I was like, that just doesn't seem like the right fit. Like, it doesn't seem like the right character for, I get why Dylan Raiola would want to go to Oregon. I didn't get why Oregon would want Dylan Raiola. But hearing now that he is comfortable being a backup, comfortable taking a year off, he's also got a serious injury that he's, rehabbing. So it's not like he was going to be ready for maybe an entire year, even when it got to that point. But I love the idea of him being able to take a step back, fine-tune some of the technique things, take the development you need, and then hit 2027 in stride. Because that's the thing, Oregon loses Will Stein, and you're like, okay, well, you definitely lose a bright offensive mind, but they didn't really lose too much when they lost Kenny Dillingham because they had Will Stein in place. Like, hopefully there's the next guy there calling plays, running this offense where you're like, yep, doesn't matter. We still got our guy, because they're always going to have the talent. They're always going to have the good run support, the talented wide receivers. Oregon is going to have enough pieces for Dylan Raiola to take the next step. I just love that he's giving himself a little bit of a chance to fine-tune some things, maybe get with players that he couldn't have played with at Nebraska, and then hopefully hit things strong in 2027. So that was big news up in Eugene. Coy Parrish, safety, stud from Minnesota. He committed to the Ducks as well. They also picked up a tight end from Penn State. Two big moves for the Ducks because they're losing a couple of pieces. Dylan Thieneman, I think is his last name. He's going to the NFL draft, as is Kenyon Sadiq. So it's kind of just wash, rinse, and repeat at Oregon. You never worry about them losing guys and not being able to pump some new dudes back into the system. So love those additions there for the Ducks as they try and keep on keeping on and get this thing right one of these years or just click. Jordan Seaton hit the transfer portal over the last couple of days. Stud tackle at Colorado. Very talented player. He started as a high school senior basically for Colorado as a freshman. I think he was all rookie first team in the Big 12 that year. All the big boys are expected to be in on Seaton. The names to know: Texas, which Texas can finish off with a Cam Coleman, Hollywood Smothers, Jordan Seaton addition to the offense. Like, holy shit, that'd be great. So he's one to watch. Oregon's another one to watch. LSU, Ohio State, Miami, Texas A&M, all those teams that either need offensive linemen really bad or have, great success of churning out NFL talent at those positions. So those are the ones to watch for Seaton. Interesting story with Seaton. And they're just kids, so you can't fault them for the mistakes they make along the way in their life. But he went to Colorado's creative team to make a highlight tape for him. Like, hey, let's just show off my best of the year. And then he used that highlight tape that Colorado made for him to then announce his intentions to hit the transfer portal. I wouldn't say it's the best look. I wouldn't say it's the smartest thing to do. But talent outweighs brains sometimes, and he'll land somewhere great, and hopefully will continue on with what's a nice start to his collegiate career. Notre Dame burst onto the scene the last couple of days. They are now up to the number 1 rated incoming class. I believe that considers all of your signees, your high school commits and your transfers. They landed a couple of wideouts from Ohio State, Quincy Porter, Mylan Graham. Both of those guys, obviously there's a whole shift in philosophy or belief in Ohio State now with Brian Hartline as the head coach at USF. But those are two big additions. I believe Quincy Porter is the big one to know, not that Mylan Graham isn't. But they didn't just stop there. Cornerback Jaden Sanders comes in from Michigan. They got Keon Keeley over from Alabama. That's an edge player that I think is super uber talented, but it just hasn't popped right. He's the guy of this group where if we're sitting here a year from now and we're talking most impactful transfers, Keon Keeley with the right fit. And I love how Notre Dame operates its defensive front, just from a schematic standpoint. He's a guy that I think we could be saying that was one of the most impactful transfers of the offseason. So I love that addition. They also got a massive defensive tackle from Pitt, Francis Brouillou. I think that's how you say it. A W and a U, Brouillou. So those are some big names going into Notre Dame. I know that everybody is kind of if you're a Fighting Irish fan, you're kind of sitting on pins and needles because Marcus Freeman got in front of a microphone and he said, I'm currently the head coach at Notre Dame. I'm the head coach at Notre Dame. Meanwhile, there's a lot of big NFL jobs open. I think he sticks around. I'd love for him too. I think he's got a great situation in Notre Dame. But even if not, be happy that you got these guys here too, because it's been a slow start to the transfer portal for Notre Dame, but they've picked it up in a big way. Some massive additions at positions of need. LSU has figured out its quarterback room under Lane Kiffin. I know when we recorded on Monday, it was, Sam Leavitt was committed, but was waiting on a final offer from Tennessee. That offer, I don't know if it ever came to fruition or if he turned it down. Sam Leavitt will be Lane Kiffin's starting quarterback at LSU. Good fit. He's been around some really good offensive coordinators. He's been with Kenny Dillingham. He's now going to be with Lane Kiffin and Charlie Weiss. I think he will do a good job at LSU, at least in setting a sturdy foundation. I don't think he's the most talented quarterback in the world, but in terms of just we need productive play out of our quarterback, we need consistent play, a guy that will operate the offense. I think that's a good addition there. They also brought in maybe the future 5-star, Hassan Longstreet. He comes in from USC. He should probably be the backup there. But oh wait, they also added an FCS phenom in Elon's Landon Clark, which I think everybody's going to do the dumb thing where they're like, where's the next Trinidad Chambliss? And it's like, well, maybe there isn't one. But of course, then Lane goes and signs a guy from Elon who was the conference rookie of the year. And everybody's going to start trying to wait to see when he can get his time to shine at LSU. Those are the biggest things that have stood out to me from the transfer portal. I'm trying to think off the top of my head if there's anything else. That's all I've got on that side of things. We're going to take one more break so I can get my different setup in place for the TBHs and rates, and then we'll finish off today's show.
My name's Blake.
All right, new segment alert. We are trying to wrap a bow on the college football season. I was trying to think of a fun, creative way to where I'm not just sitting here doing like, let's review the ACC, let's review the SEC the next show. I just want to do it at random. We're going to fire off 5 teams at a time until we get this thing done. We're going to spin a wheel. If you're watching on YouTube, I don't think I have the technical ability to get the wheel recording on the screen. So when it wheels, it's just for me wanting to do it at random. Just, oh, that's who we're going to do today. There's no real reason. Watching a wheel is fun. The wheel will be recorded on social, so if you want to watch it that way, go to TikTok. I'll post all of them over there. If you're listening, obviously none of this means shit to you, but we're going to spin a wheel for teams whose seasons have come to an end. We're not including playoff teams yet. I want the playoffs to finish before we loop those ones in, because then we can say like, oh yeah, Oregon, you lost to the national champion, or oh, Ohio State, you got bumped off by the national champion. I'm saving playoffs until the playoffs are officially done. And again, we're not touching on every team. We're talking about teams that I think had somewhat relevant seasons or they're somewhat relevant programs. So we're going to do all that. We're going to get started. The first spin for a TBH and rate is... Oh, that's a hilarious one. Oh, is it moving? Texas. Okay. All right, so Texas up first on the TBH and rate. I thought we were going to get to North Carolina. Texas. So Texas is a really interesting TBH. Relative to everybody's expectations of them, it's hard to feel like they had a good season. The preseason number 1, they go in and they lose the opening game. The majority of the season, the offense doesn't look great. They finished the year 1 game outside of the college football playoffs, a 3-loss season. To me, they were still one of the more talented rosters. They just had pieces of their team that weren't working at the right time. So the TBH, you didn't live up to the hype, but in terms of what you got developing at the quarterback position, it's hard to not feel good about the future. So right now you can take a look and say, yeah, number 1 overall, you even missed the playoffs. That's a bad way to go. But for a 9-3 season, to get your new quarterback up to speed where he might enter next year as the best guy in college football. And if you don't believe me, just go back and watch the last few games. He's on that trajectory. It's hard to not feel in a solid place. But this is a TBH and rate for the 2025 season specifically. So the rate, I'm going to give you a 5. I'm going to give it a 5.2. 5.2 for Texas. Again, one of those things where relative to everybody's expectations, it's a massive disappointment. But you were still a 3-loss team. That's 9 wins. You did lose to just about all the big boys you went up against outside of Texas A&M, but lots to look forward to. And the development you got at the most important position from your most important player has you feeling like things can be good in 2026. So, all right, let's spin the wheel a second time, the second TBH and rate, and that is none other than LSU. We're just hitting all the SEC big boys in this one. Okay, so LSU, TBH, we all knew where this thing was going to go. We all knew at the start of the 2025 season that as soon as the first or the second early loss piled up, this thing was going to go downhill quick. I think a lot of people believed this was going to be the year it takes off. They believed in the quarterback. They believed in the coach. Me, frankly, I didn't believe in it. I had them outside of the playoff conversation at the beginning of the year. I think I had them outside of my top 16 teams in the country. Maybe to other teams' expectations, it was bad, but even for me, it went really poorly. You fire your head coach. The players hate being there. The quarterback takes a massive step back. You still can't run the football. It was a mess at LSU. You wasted away a really good defense. The rate, 2. 2.5. Maybe the 2.5 is just because it got so bad you were able to move off Brian Kelly. But TBH, shit show of a year, rate 2.5. Let's do a third one. I don't know if I like this or not yet, but we'll do another TBH and rate. We'll see how this goes and then try it again next year. We are just knocking off SEC, SEC, SEC. We're going to make for some all ACC Big 12. So TBH and a rate for the University of Tennessee. Tennessee is always going to have a sturdy floor under Josh Heupel. They are always going to have an offense that is great enough to get them to a certain point. TBH, I keep forgetting that you have to be honest, I felt like you did better than you should have. That's what it is. TBH for Tennessee, you accomplished more than I thought you were going to. I thought losing a quarterback in the middle parts of the season or in the offseason was going to be a mess. I did think that you were going to bring in a guy that was maybe going to steady the ship a little bit more, but it was hard to integrate a guy that quickly into a pretty intricate system. TBH, the offense was great. The defense took a step back. You didn't get your what you needed out of your top cornerbacks. One was banged up the entire year. One you had to dismiss. Tennessee, you got more than I thought you were going to. And you still had some nice pieces come out along the way. So rate, look, relative to expectations, I'd put it at 7.5. Like, obviously, you miss out on the playoffs. Obviously, when you went up against your best teams, you ended up losing. You lose to Vandy, you lose to Georgia. Like, it was an unsuccessful season, but from what I expected out of you guys, to be able to still churn out a team that was competitive in the SEC, I thought was pretty good. So that's it for Tennessee. The more we do this, I'm not sure if I love this, but we'll go in with a fourth TBH and rate. And next up on the docket is Vanderbilt. We're sticking in the SEC. It's an all SEC wheel today. Vanderbilt. TBH. That fucking rocked. I loved it. One of the coolest stories in the sport to be able to not just take another step from where you were last year, where everybody was like, is Vandy going to be a thing? Oh no, Vandy is a thing. To do all of that, to knock off some good teams along the way, to beat up on an LSU, to beat a Tennessee, you had a phenomenal season here in Nashville. And not just that, the ability to retain Clark Lee, because that's part of this 2025 season, is keeping your head coach around. Phenomenal year, and brings a lot of excitement forward about the future of Vanderbilt football. So TBH, it was one of the best stories in the sport. The rate relative to expectations, I mean, how do you not go with like a 9.4? Relative to expectations, I expected Vandy to be like, yeah, they're going to be a winning football team, but to be on the fringes of the college football playoffs, it's an awesome story. So TBH, loved it. Rate 9.4. All right, let's do one more and we'll get out of here. Give me one non-SEC team so this doesn't just sound like I'm biased in all this. Oh, good. We're going to finish with a bad one. Illinois. TBH and a rate for Illinois football. TBH. I expected this out of you. I expected this. Relative to my expectations, Illinois was just fine this year. Now, relative to everybody else's expectations, of which people were like, oh yeah, this is a playoff contender. That's this year's Indiana. They're going to hit their stride in the Big Ten and be that third team in the mix. I never bought into that. I thought that there were a lot of fluky results in last year's schedule that made you feel better about where Illinois was going. And look, they still had a relatively solid season. It wasn't like things just like completely fell apart. They had a couple of nice wins along the way. I never thought it was going to be something that was playoff worthy. So that's why for me, the rate, I'd go with a 7. I think it's a perfectly fine season. I think maybe the reason that it's not higher is because everybody else expected you to be something that I didn't think you were. But relative to my expectations, pretty solid season there at Illinois. Brett Bielema, awesome head coach. And yeah, they're always going to be a frisky team in the Big Ten. And then, yeah, if you can hit off those years where you just get your bounces with the one possession wins, or, I remember there was a game with Purdue last year where it was like, yeah, they won that game. They put up 50 points, but they won 50-49 or something. Illinois, for my expectations, I expected this from you. I also expected it to be where you were and everybody else to be like, what a disappointment. So that's my TBH and rate. I'll put them at a 7.7 flat. Did I do? I don't even remember now, but that's where we'll sit with Illinois. And that's where we'll close out the first spin for a TBH and rate. Again, I don't know if I fully loved that. I don't know if I did. But we'll see how it works on socials. Again, this is more intended for me to have content to post on the social clips and to tie a bow on certain seasons. So if it worked out on TikTok, you'll hear me do it again on Monday. If not, we might kill this and try and wrap a bow on the season some other type of way. But that is going to finish off today's show. Thank you all for listening. Thank you all for coming along this ride through the first full college football season of our show. You know, I hope that you all choose to stick around for the offseason, for the NFL draft, for some other stuff I've gotten planned between now and really when things will ramp up at the end of July. But if you are going to take a little bit of a break, just know I love you. I appreciate you. I'll talk to you in 6 months. But for those that'll stick around, I think we got a lot of fun things in store. So that's all for today. Enjoy your weekend. Enjoy the national championship game. Next week, we're going to come back Tuesday. Obviously, I don't want to come out and do a Monday show an hour before the game kicks off. So we'll come back Tuesday afternoon. We'll do one on Thursday or Friday. And then, we'll just keep working through the off season and crossing our fingers that next year's season comes around quicker than we expect. I love you. I appreciate you. I'll talk to you in a few days. Peace.